wire on the communication. So even though there's video coming down the HDMI to the switcher, there's also some communication going back to the cameras. And we set all this up so it would possible to do this. So we can actually get the A2 Mini talking to the cameras back through the video connection. So that gives us control. Now we can change all the camera settings, we can do lens control, we can do tally, and also there's a DaVinci primary color corrector in there. We can do DaVinci primary color correction in there as well. Now if you look down at the user interface, you can see that there's actually a camera page that's appeared, and we've got the camera control stuff here, which is pretty cool. Now what I'll do is I'll unplug this camera and I'll plug in these cameras here, and I can show you how this all works. So let me just unplug this guy here, and I'll put it under the bench. And I've got these cameras wired up into here, so I can plug those in. And get my cables, there's 4 of them. There they are. I'll plug this guy in here. Okie dokie. So what you should have seen is that now we have the first thing that's most obvious is the tally lights. So let me show you the tally. Now the camera is one thing that's worth noting. When the camera's plugged in, it detects that it's talking to an A2 Mini, and it switches the camera into studio mode automatically. And also it'll actually set the video standard of the cameras, apart from the first camera and camera 1, because the switcher takes camera 1's video standard, and then the other cameras will then follow the switcher, so it automatically sets itself up. Now let me show you the tally lights. You should be able to see over on the camera over there, you can see the tally light changing, and because I'm using preview, what it means is as I step around and try, you can see the preview lights moving around so that the presenter can see which camera is about to go on air, and then when I bring the camera on air, it switches across, and I can select the next camera, go cut, select the next one. So you can see it's really quite powerful. If I do a transition, both cameras are on air for a short period of time, so you'll be able to see both tally lights go red and then it switches across. So obviously when you're doing program preview switching, the camera that was just on air is now armed for, is the preview camera for the next transition. So you can see really how powerful this is, and the presenters, it's just like a studio camera, the presenters now can see which camera is on. And also the other thing we've done on the back on the LCD, you can see that we've got a, if I bring camera 1 on air, you can see I've got a preview label, and when I bring it on, I've got an on-air label, and that's independent of the other screen overlays that are there. So that really makes it much nicer for if there's a camera operator to see what's going on. Now, the other option features you've got is obviously we can control the iris. I've got camera 1 on air and I've got video out. Yeah, it's on air, and so I can come into here and I can now adjust the iris. So I've got full iris control on the camera, and you can see the screen is adjusting. So that's controlling the lens on the camera. So you got all that. I've also got ISO settings. I can set the ISO, which come up as gain on, in the broadcast terminology, ISO is the same as gain. In fact, it's, it's gain, so I can bring that up. And then I can, so as the light reduces, there it is there. So I've got quite a lot of stuff. I can even do color tint, so I can change the color, because there's a DaVinci primary color corrector. So I can go off to blue, I can go really red if I like. So it goes nuts. And also, this is a DaVinci primary color corrector, so I've got gamma, lift, gain. But if I click this button here, I actually get full color wheels, like very much like DaVinci Color, a DaVinci color corrector. So I've got a lot more control here. And of course I can reset. And you can do the individual channels here as well. What's interesting about DaVinci is you obviously got shadows, mids and highlights like a normal color corrector, or lift, gamma and gain is a more color correction terminology. But one thing about DaVinci is it's a YRGB color corrector. So you can even do the Y channel independently of the red, green and blue channels. And that's how DaVinci works. Oops, I'm a little bit overcooked here, so I'll bring it down a little bit. But you can bring up the Y channel independently. Whoops, I've gone way too far there. But you can see, in fact, I'm doing black, which is not what I want to do. So maybe I can bring up the whites in the, see, I can sort of start to bring the whites up and they pop a bit and sort of pulls the whites out, because that's the way DaVinci Resolve works. So the primary color corrector is actually the same between the two products, so that way you've got, if you're used to using DaVinci, you should be able to actually do some really creative looks in here, so it's really nice. Now, one of the other nice things about the camera controller is it doesn't lock out. On our bigger cameras, the switcher actually takes over the control of these settings in the cameras. But in the pocket camera situation, it doesn't lock out the camera settings. You should be able to change settings locally, and then when you change something here, it'll override that. So it helps you to have retain a bit of control on the camera. Now, when you're working as a studio camera, you're still able to record, but it'll work in Blackmagic RAW and 4K in the case of these cameras, or 6K in the Blackmagic Cinema camera, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K. I think with these new features, you really get a very professional sort of television studio. I mean, you've got full camera control. You can control all the cameras here. And you can adjust them all. You can match the cameras. It's really quite powerful. And so obviously it's really important that all your cameras are matched. You know, the presenters can see when they're on air with the tally light. You get wonderful color graded digital film images. I mean, you can really spend a lot of time getting the hang of really how to make a wonderful looking digital film looking actual sort of image quality, or just go nuts and do something really over the top. So I mean, that's the great thing about sort of the freedom to be really creative, and having all that control, I think, is giving you access to getting beautiful quality video out, but you're still able to record the Blackmagic RAW files internally and color grade them later. So the new ATEM switches 8.2 software update, which is what you need for the ATEM Mini, that'll be available today as a free update. It'll support all the ATEM Mini switches that have shipped up until now. And the new Blackmagic Cameras 6.9 update is also a free update, and that's available today as well. And that'll support all the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K models that we've shipped up until now. Now, that's not all we have today. We've also I want to introduce a new model of ATEM Mini, and it's called ATEM Mini Pro. Now, the first thing to know about this new model is that it's got the exact same features of the ATEM Mini model, but it also adds a few new and very powerful features. So let's have a look. What I'll do is I'll bring it out, and you can see, here it is here. So there it is. As you can see, it's very similar to the current model. It's got a few more buttons on the front, so I can bring it up and have a look there. So you can see the front, and you can also see the rear. It's got the exact same connectors on the rear panel, so if you can get a shot of them there. So it's got the same connections as the ATEM Mini, so it's really easy to set up. But there is some extra controls on the front panel, as you can see around here. So look, what I'll do is I'll plug it in. So I'll unplug the ATEM Mini, I'll plug in the ATEM Mini Pro. So the first thing I'll do is plug some power in. I'll plug in some control. And I'll move this guy out of the way. I'll put him there. And I'll plug in some video. I'll plug our cameras in. So it's all the same. Get my connectors lined up here. I'll put this one aside. So look, put him there so you can see it. I can get a shot of the model there. Now, really the biggest feature of this model, I'll just lock down the power so I don't pull it out by accidentally. Now, really the biggest, most sort of important feature in this new model is it's got built-in hardware. It's got a built-in hardware streaming engine. Now, this is a big deal because the hardware has been specifically designed for streaming. Now, one of the problems with using streaming software is, depending on the computer, streaming software can drop frames. You know, it's really, encoding a stream is a pretty complex task for a computer to do. It needs a lot of power to do it well. But now we have that hardware built in. It's specifically designed to generate a stream, which means you get smoother looking images and you don't get dropped frames. And also, you don't need to convert the webcam compression to the streaming compression, so you don't get like double generation of video compression. You know, the program output, the first time the video is compressed is in the hardware encoder, which is built into the ATEM Mini Pro. So you get the streaming, the video output, the program output is directly converted to the streaming codec. Now, you don't need any extra software because the streaming is built in. You don't need any extra software running on the computer, which is nice because the computer can just use the software control. You don't need to have an extra app running in the background that's doing all that streaming. And one of the problems with streaming software is it's got a lot of complex settings. We've made it a much, much simpler process. You know, ATEM Mini Pro makes streaming really simple. So look, let me show you how it works. Now, one of the things that it uses the Ethernet connection. Now, on ATEM Mini, the Ethernet's used for control, but on ATEM Mini Pro, you can stream via the same Ethernet connection as you're using for control. Now, the advantage to this is that you can actually do your control and the streaming through the USB signal. So let's plug that in. I've got an Ethernet cable here, and I'll replace the USB with this. So, and then what we can do is we can use the computer to share its internet, so we can use a mobile streaming. Now I've got this computer set up to have Wi-Fi to connect to the internet, and I've set the sharing settings to allow the Ethernet to share via the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi is doing the internet connection, and then the Ethernet connection I'll plug in here is now got the internet to the AT Mini through this computer. So this computer is basically converting the Wi-Fi to Ethernet. So I'll get rid of the USB and I'll plug this in here. I'll plug in the Ethernet. There it is there. Now, it's just come up. Normally, probably because we practiced this before, normally you just go up to the connection menu up there and click connect and it'll come up. And in fact, I'll do that so you can see how that works. So we've added also another change here where it can find the switches on the network. In this case, it's directly connected. You can just click the AT Mini Pro and then connect. It's already connected. Oh, I did unselected. So you can see now what I've got is I've got the AT Mini Pro working through the control through the Ethernet, and you can see all the control works fine. Oops, let me plug a different camera in. So you can see I've got the two different cameras. That all works fine. And I can click the pages. I can go to the camera page and do some control. That's my on-air camera. So it's quite powerful. Now the switcher can now see the computer, and the ATEM software control can control it. So that's all working fine. But the switcher can also see the internet, so we can use it for the live mobile stream, because now it's doing both. Now what I'll do is I'll show you where that's set up, because it's a little tricky. But if you go into the system preferences and you go to the sharing folder, you can see I've got internet sharing selected here, and you can see that I'm sharing the Wi-Fi, and that's connected via this little, that's the adapter brand here. So that's all you need to do. You just need to go into the internet sharing, and that's on a Mac. On Windows it's a different setting, but you can do the similar thing on Windows. And now I've got the internet on this, and it's going out through the Wi-Fi. Now what that also means is that we can set up to do streaming. So what I'll do is I'll go and select YouTube. So what I do is I go into the output palette here, and you can see I've got a live stream palette. You can see here it is here. Now I'll select YouTube, and there it is there. Now what I need to do is I need to get a streaming key from the YouTube server. So if I go down to, now I've got that page set up, just open here. This is the streaming page to set up a stream on YouTube. If I go down to here, I can get my streaming key, and I can copy that out. Then I can go across and paste that streaming key in there. I can also set the quality. I'll use streaming high, and that's it. Now you want to set the quality high enough so you don't get pixels. And as you can see, I just selected streaming high because you want to make sure you get enough bandwidth to handle, particularly if you're doing higher frame rates. You'll obviously need more data if you're using higher frame rates. Now you can change the ATEM Mini Pro to a lower frame rate if you like, and the input converters will actually take care of it. So if you had like a gaming console that was doing a high frame rate, you could just switch the ATEM Mini Pro down to like 24 frame or something like that to allow the data rate to go lower, and then it's easy to stream, but your input converter will just take care of switching the video input down to that lower frame rate. Now what I'll do is I'll go into the streaming here, and I've copied the key in. So what I'll do is now I can pretty much just start streaming by going on air. Now there's a button on the front panel here, and I can actually make it go on air just by pushing on air. Now what that'll do is now it's live broadcasting to YouTube. Now it'll take about 30 seconds or so before it comes through, so I'll just come in here and I'll just reset that page, and I think it's looking pretty good there. And it's all looking like it's running. So yeah, it does take, there's obviously a bit of caching through the YouTube path. It'll take a little bit before it sort of comes through and cleans up. So you can set the streaming from the front panel like I just did here, or you can also do it from the palette here as well. Now the other thing we've got is, when you're live switching, you're not actually going to have the streaming palette open. You're going to have transition palettes or care palettes open. So you can also get a status of the streaming. So if you click on this display status down here, it'll show you the status information down the bottom of the page. Now what that'll do is it'll show you a few bits of detail, like obviously whether it's on air, but it also shows you the data rate that's needed for the stream. Now that's really important, and it live updates as based on the video you're switching. So different types of video sometimes will create different data rates, and it's also obviously set by the quality menu that you set as well. Now the data rate's important because that's how much data you'll need from your ISP to make sure you've got enough internet bandwidth to get your stream out. So it'll be good to know, you can do some experiments with that and make sure you've got a lot of enough data rate. You can obviously drop the data rate down lower if you're having some issues with getting data, particularly if you're mobile streaming and maybe you're tethering a phone or something like that. Now, the other bit of information down here is also the cache. Now, it just says OK at the moment, but it can also be a percentage. A10 Mini Pro has got a bit of memory in it, and what it tries to do is keep the stream going out. Now, if there's an interruption to the internet or some congestion, it'll cache and then try to get it through as the internet comes back online. So you'll often see the, sometimes, well, you won't hopefully see it, but you can see if it's getting behind, you'll see that this percentage goes up, and that means it's actually having trouble getting the data out. Mostly you'll see that if someone trips over your internet cable and knocks the internet out, and then you might see that. Now, if we go to the YouTube page, we can see that we've got the live stream coming through here. Our condition is good. And if I change one of the sources, you'll see the source change here, and that's your stream. Now, there's obviously a little bit of a delay on this because it takes a while for the stream to get through and then come back through via YouTube. So that's essentially what protects you from choppy internet data rates, because the YouTube is also caching some of the data for you. And as you do different transitions to different cameras, you can see that program will come out and it'll change on the video up there. Yeah, there it goes there. So you can see it's 10 seconds or so. It's not too long. Now, it's funny, even if you just used A10 Mini Pro for a streaming interface, it'd probably be worth it just for that. Now, one thing that's also worth thinking about, we've also thought about high-end broadcast engineers. Now, obviously you can see in here it's pretty simple to get the streaming going. But if you're using like a high-end work and you need to tweak the settings, you can get in and customize an XML file. What we've done is we've put all the settings that are in here in an XML file, and you can go in there and you can customize that XML file and get through it. And there's details on how to do that in the manual. So if you're technically minded, you can just go in the XML file and you can tweak the settings. You could even add other services. You could add a custom streaming service into that XML file, and then it'll appear in the menus here and populate. Like you could even run, like if you're using you could remove services from the XML file if you wanted. So say you're setting up a community group with an A10 Mini Pro and you didn't want them really changing the settings, you could take out the settings in the XML file you don't want. So that's in the user folder for the application preferences, and you can see how that works. In the manual's got some details on it. Now, one of the other features we've got in here is we thought, well, with a powerful streaming engine built in, we thought it'd be good if we could actually record the stream as well. So what we did is we added the same software that runs on our HyperDeck Studio Mini into the A10 Mini Pro. So this lets us record video direct to an external USB device, USB disk. Now, this is an exact duplicate of the video you're streaming. The video is encoded with H.264 format with an AAC codec, which means you can upload the file to YouTube or any other streaming service later. Now, this kind of protects against an internet outage. Like say you're doing a live stream and the internet went out. Well, if you're recording the stream, then you've always got something for upload later. Now, you've also got a choice between different data rates. As you can see in the menu there, I've got the HyperDeck data rates, which are really high quality, almost they're broadcast quality data rates. And there's also some lower quality streaming data rates as well, which are pretty good, but they're more designed to allow you to get through lower internet speeds. Now, there's a button for the recording on the front panel as well. You can see it right there. And there's also a disk status light just above it. So you get the status of the disk. Now, the disk status light will show green when the disk is ready to record. It'll show red when you are recording. It'll also blink slowly if your disk is about to become full. So that's very much like a HyperDeck. Because the data is recorded in H.264, it's actually low enough so you can use a mechanical hard disk or a USB thumb drive or something like that. Now, to show you this, what I've actually got a mechanical hard disk here. If I plug in this here, and this is a mechanical disk. Now, I've unplugged the USB because I'm using Ethernet for control. So if I plug this in, mechanical disks are a little bit slower to get going because they've got to spin up. But these are incredibly low cost, these disks. And you can record for hours without it getting expensive. So what's really nice about that is if you can record every job you do, and that'll mean you can archive everything you've ever done. So you can see the lights come up green there. And if I hit record, now Now I'm recording the disk. Now, so you can see very clearly when you're recording, and it also supports the disk being accidentally unplugged. So I'm recording currently on that. Now, if I just yank this cable out, which is really what you normally wouldn't do, but I can do it. So what I'll do is, instead of stopping the recording gracefully, I'll just yank the cable out like that. Now if I plug that disk into the computer, I can mount that disk and I can show you the file. So again, it's a mechanical disk, so it takes a moment to spin up. There it is. And I think which file was the one we just created? There it is there. So you can see it's very fast. It's a very fast file. It's very easy to, you can use it for, it's really fast file. It's got that icon preview. I don't like icon previews. They're confusing. So you can see that the files are very fast to shuttle. So this is great if you want to edit the files later, because it works just like a normal editing video file. Now the other thing you can do is I can record to an SD card, a thumb drive. Really anything works. So if I plug this in, even a thumb drive's fine. I can plug that in there, and you can see that it's come up. There it goes. Now I can hit record. There it is. You can connect now. One thing I'll show you just before I move on to the next point is that in the record stream palette, whoops, you see there I am there. I've got a similar palette. I've also got display status there, so you can see that I'm now the time I've got and the recording. But as you can see here, you can actually connect multiple disks via USB hub or a multi-dock, like multi-dock over there. So these settings for the recording are in the ATEM software control. Now the USB port on the ATEM Mini Pro here is now free because we're using the Ethernet, like I just mentioned. So this gives us the ability to really take over the USB port for all kinds of disks, hubs or multiple disks. Now you can see the settings here. I've got some control. Because I'm recording, actually I'll stop here so you can see the palettes are enabled. But you can actually see I've got the disk here selected, but I've got the ability to do more than one disk. Now I can start and stop recording also by the palette as well. So you can see I've started here. I can do it from the front panel. So it's pretty easy. And I've got all my status down here. So if I go to other palettes and I'm doing some transitions, I've still got the status down the bottom here, and I can still see what's going on with the streaming and the recording, which I'm doing both at the moment. And you can start and stop those independently of each other. Now, what I'll do is I'll show you some multiple disk stuff. I'll go back to the output palette. In fact, I'll close the streaming palette, just focus on the record palette, because what I'll do is I'll show you how it handles multiple disks. Now, for that, what I'll do is I'll change to a multi-dock, because I'll stop recording, and I'll unplug the thumb drive, which is one of those thumb drives that comes apart in pieces, so that's awesome. I've got a collection of bits. So what I'll do is I'll unplug leave my mechanical disk aside, and I've got a multi-dock here. So you can see a now basically Blackmagic multi-dock allows you to plug 4 disks on a single USB connection. So it's really very much like, it's basically, and it's really just for me to show you a good way of plugging in multiple disks. You don't need to use one of these, of course. But it's a great way of showing 4 disks on a single USB connection, because that's essentially all it really is. It's got a single USB on the back, and well, in fact there's 2 USBs. You can have it groups at 2 groups at 2 if you like. But I can plug this in. I'll use the cable I was using for control before, and I'll plug it in. And I've got a bunch of disks here. So I'll plug one of the disks in. Oops, wrong way around. Now that's now put that SSD on the USB chain, and you can see it'll appear in the palette. There it is. And you can see it's come up the disk screen, so it's good to record. I can start recording on that disk, and you can see the palettes come up. Now, what I can do is I can plug in a second disk, and it'll show you how. So this is a very good scenario, right? You might be recording a performance. You got one disk in, that's recording. Now I need to be able to, that disk's getting full, I might be able to swap over. So what I'll do is I'll plug a second disk in. In fact, I'll plug all the disks in.